Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to unpack one of the absolute most fascinating ancient geological mysteries out there today. I'm honestly so thrilled to guide you through this whole thing because we're looking at a phenomenon that literally terrified people for centuries. It's like a giant puzzle, and we're going to solve this ancient geological mystery together right now. Let's get into it.
So imagine for a second, you're walking through a rugged, ancient landscape, right? And you stumble upon this gaping maw in the earth. The locals, they whisper about it. They warn you to stay far, far away. It really leaves us to wonder, what if the gates to hell were real? Think about it. These weren't just spooky stories told around a campfire to scare kids. No, these were physical geographical locations that people genuinely truly believed led straight down into the underworld. And what makes this so incredibly fascinating is that they had some deeply chilling evidence to back it up.
Animals dropping dead just by approaching. This is an ancient crime scene, plain and simple. Picture this. A bird flies just a little too close to the entrance of a specific cave and bam, it drops right out of the sky completely lifeless. Or maybe a beast of burden wanders a few steps too near the rocky opening and just instantly collapses. There's no visible trauma, no predators in sight, literally no physical struggle at all, just instant, inexplicable death. It's exactly the kind of undeniable, terrifying evidence that would make absolutely anyone believe they were standing at the very threshold of a dark, supernatural realm.
And the crazy thing is, this wasn't an isolated incident. The most famous historical example is the Plutonium at Hierapolis, which was an ancient site notorious for this exact terrifying phenomenon. But we actually see a distinct pattern of these so-called cursed locations all throughout history. It's a pattern that even echoes in modern toxic urban legends and modern medical anomalies, where the air itself just seems to turn lethal without any warning whatsoever. Across entirely different eras and cultures, we keep finding these specific geographic hotspots with invisible, deadly perimeters. So it really begs the question, what was actually happening at these sites?
Well, let's look at the facts. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how we can put the myth and the science right next to each other to finally crack the case. On side A, we have the ancient explanation, right? A cursed portal to the underworld, claiming the lives of the innocent through demonic power. But on side B, we reveal the invisible killer, a poisonous carbon dioxide vent. Boom! The ancient curse was actually just raw chemistry. These specific caves were sitting right on top of highly active geological fissures. And those fissures, they were pumping out massive, heavily concentrated amounts of poisonous carbon dioxide gas from deep within the earth.
To really understand the mechanics here, we gotta look at the gas itself. Carbon dioxide is much heavier than the oxygen we breathe. This means it doesn't just float away into the sky, it settles. It pools low to the ground, sort of like an invisible lake of toxic air. And because the gas sits so incredibly low, animals, especially low-flying birds or four-legged beasts, were completely submerged in this lethal layer of CO2. That's what led to that instant death we talked about. But the humans, specifically the temple priests who managed these sites, they were much taller. Their heads were literally above the invisible poison, which allowed them to breathe perfectly fine while everything down at their feet perished.
And this brilliantly illustrates how those ancient priests took full, theatrical advantage of this natural phenomenon. Step 1, find a thin pocket of oxygen because, well, you're tall enough to reach it above the gas line. Step 2, if you have to bend down near the animals, just hold your breath. And step 3, look absolutely magical to everyone watching. You really have to hand it to them. It was an incredible performance. They would boldly walk into these cursed caves alongside a sacrificial animal. The animal would mysteriously drop dead, while the priest just stood there, completely unharmed, appearing to hold divine power over life and death. A little bit of hidden geological knowledge made for one heck of a magic trick, didn't it?
So, the crucial point is this. We need to completely reframe how we think about ancient mythology. This is what we call early data interpretation. It's so easy for us today to look back and just assume our ancestors were making up silly stories because they didn't know any better. But actually, scratch that. It completely misses the reality of what they were doing. They were trying to understand incredibly complex geological and chemical events. They were taking the raw, terrifying data they were observing and translating it into literally the only framework and language they had available to them at the time.
Let's piece this together. They observed instant animal deaths. That is hard, factual data. They witnessed priests miraculously surviving. Again, empirical observation. Sure, they attributed these chemical events to the gods because they lacked modern scientific instruments, but the core truth remains. They were actually recording very real geological data. Every single myth about these gates to hell is essentially an ancient warning label preserved in folklore.
They were mapping out toxic gas leaks and creating a memorable narrative structure to keep their communities safe from invisible threats. When you look at it that way, it's actually a brilliant, ancient way of communicating vital scientific information.
Which brings us to a provocative question I really want you to take away from this explainer today. What other ancient myths are just waiting for a scientific translation? If a terrifying portal to hell was actually just a heavy carbon dioxide vent, how many other monsters, ancient curses, and magical events in our history books are simply misunderstood geology or chemistry? By looking closely at the data embedded in these stories, we can literally decode the past. I really hope this sparks a completely new curiosity for you the next time you hear an ancient legend. Thank you so much for joining me to solve this mystery, and keep questioning the data behind the myths.